Good evening, everybody. Can you see all the books? Okay, good. Good evening, everybody. I'm Gadi Levy. I'm the director of the Temple Emanu-El Streicker Center, and I'm super excited to welcome you to a program that's somewhere between a book fair and speed dating, as strange as it might sound. I could introduce this evening by talking about the long devotion of Jews to reading, or about our being the people of the book. But what tonight is really about is the joy of discovering new stories, seeing the world through a different lens, and about losing yourself in someone else's reality. We are honored to welcome a group of women and men who make that possible. 13 authors of novels and autobiographies, self-help guides and screenplays, of the tales of Persian Jewish immigrants, gay American dads, family reunions in the Catskills, and the healing power of forgiveness. Before you meet the first of them, I also want to make an announcement that next week we will be hosting Tony Kushner, and we'll be hosting Lin-Manuel Miranda, if you'd like to join us again. We will begin, let me tell you a little about the structure of the evening. We will begin tonight by lighting of the Hanukkah candles, third night of Hanukkah, led by our senior rabbi Joshua Davidson, with Zibby and Katie, helping lighting the Chanukiah. We will then join in a conversation between Katie, Couric, and Zibby Owens. They will take your questions. If you're joining us virtually, you can submit your questions via the chat function. For those of you in the room, we will set up microphones that you can use to ask your questions. After the discussions, Katie and Zibby will introduce the 11 authors that are with us tonight, and for what we think of as a reading speed dating, to hook you up with books that we think that you will love. Each author will speak for a few minutes. Their books are going to be on sale, and they will be available for book signing following the event downstairs. I hope I made everything clear. As I said, tonight is Hanukkah. We're going to start with lighting of the menorah, but also in Hanukkah we give gifts. We love doing those gifts. I don't have my glasses with me, but I'm going to ask a question. If you know the answer, don't yell it. Just raise your hand, and if you have the right answer, you will get all the books as a gift from the Streicker Center. Ready? But I need someone to figure out who answers first. Okay. No Googling. Do not Google. Okay? When is Katie Couric's birthday? Okay, take a guess. Okay, tell me. Wait, no, you're an author. You heard it right now. I asked in the green room. That's not fair. Tell me. January. Yeah, but January what? What? How do you know? Come on down and get all the books. They're yours. I have a whole introduction here of Zibby and Katie. I will just say the following. As we all know Katie Couric. We all love Katie Couric. We woke up every morning to have coffee with her when she co-anchored the Today Show from 1991 to 2006. Then we followed her when she became the first solo female anchor of a major news network nightly news broadcast. Tonight she's going to get personal, and as you read, very personal with a new book and behind the scenes of what's going on with the media in a brutally honest, often heartbreaking new book going there. She'll be chatting with Zibby Owens, who has been helping women figure out what to read for 3 years in her award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read. The editor of a new collection of essays about women trying to balance children, sleep, friendships, and career. She recently had added publisher to a long list of accomplishments. It's time to start. Ladies and gentlemen, Rabbi Davidson, Katie Couric, and Zibby Owens.
So we join in the two blessings, the first over the candles and the second over the Maccabees' victory. As Gadi said, I'm a rabbi, not a cantor, so you have to help us. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, Vitzivanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem ba'azman hazeh. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. And now, Zibby Owens and Katie Couric.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Zibby. Hi, everyone.
And thanks to everybody who's watching virtually. We have to talk right into our microphones for the virtual thing, so don't think that we're doing anything too odd or whatever.
Right, yes, we have to really speak loudly. Hi, everyone. I like the sound of my voice in this mic.
You sound great.
Thank you.
We're just going to take the mics with us after. We're just going to ring around all night. Well, it's so exciting to get to talk to you about your book, Going There. So we are going to go there tonight a little bit. I really wanted to know, why did you decide to go there? Why did you decide to write this book? And why now, especially at this point in your life?
Well, if not now, when? I'm 64. I'll be 65 on January 7th. Impressive, whoever knew that. I had, I've done a lot in the news industry. I've worked at every network except for Fox. Know your audience, right? And I'd worked at Yahoo. I had done a syndicated talk show for a couple of years, worked at Yahoo because I saw how the landscape was changing. And then in 2018, my husband and I decided to start a media company because we saw how the landscape was so fragmented and digital content was becoming more and more important. Television news was declining, and that was the case even when I went to CBS. So I had this moment in my life, Zibby, where I had much more freedom. I wasn't beholden to any corporation or any boss. I was really happy not to work for the man anymore, but work for myself. Well, I do work for my husband, kind of, but he's the CEO. And I just decided I've been the beneficiary and the lucky recipient of this extraordinary life that I never anticipated in a million years. It's been full of high points beyond my wildest expectations, and of course, some really low points, having lost both my husband and sister to cancer. And I have had this incredible ride, and I thought, why not write about it, not only as a gift to my daughters, but also I thought there might be some life lessons in those pages about persistence, about resilience, about, kind of getting kicked and getting back up and not taking no for an answer. And I actually love to write, and I enjoy writing. I love words and language. I always have. So for all of those reasons, I thought this would be a good time for me to put pen to paper or fingertip to iPad keyboard and start to write about my life. And it was really fun and, really hard in places, but I love doing it. And I know it probably sounds conceited, but I really love my book. And I, once in a while I'll read it, and John's like, "Are you reading your book again?" I'm like, "Yeah, I really like it." And so but also a gift for my daughters. They were 6 and 2 when my husband died, and they never got to know him, and so I wanted him to come alive in a way in this book. And anyway, I really enjoyed it, and I thought, while I still remember, I better write it down.
It's great because you have both the news side of your whole life, and you track that in great detail. And that was very interesting, especially being a woman and changing and pivoting so many times and doing all these different things. But you also track your whole private life, which maybe this is creepy of me, I found really interesting. And I was like, hey,
That's super creepy.
It is.
I'm kidding.
I'm very
kidding.
creepy.
It's not creepy. I wrote about it. So
I wait
hopefully-
outside her apartment every night and just look at her windows. No. I was especially struck by your relationship with your dad because it seemed really meaningful. Tell us a little bit about that. He was sort of the bookends, if you will, of this book with your epilogue to him at the end and all the ways where there are all these moments where you look to him and sort of for his approval. So just tell me about the influence of him in your life.
Well, I think my dad was a journalist. He grew up in a small town called Dublin, Georgia. He went to Mercer in Macon, Georgia, and he was the editor-in-chief of his college newspaper, and then went on to work for the Macon Telegraph and the Atlanta Constitution, and later you worked for United Press, both in Tallahassee. I think he was the bureau chief in Florida, and then moved with our family before I was born to the Washington, D.C. area. And, I think my dad was an extremely erudite person. He could talk fluently about any topic, from the Spanish-American War to F. Scott Fitzgerald. And, I wish I had those moments back, because at the dinner table, my dad would start to pontificate about something, and I would always go, shh, like a bratty kid. I was the youngest. And I just so regret that I didn't kind of really, that I wasn't more of a sponge for everything he had to teach me. Having said that, he was just extremely influential. We had to bring a new word to the dinner table every night, and there were 4 of us. And he just encouraged me. I think he saw that I was a good writer. I was a procrastinator. All these traits, I think he saw as traits that would really work in news. Because I had to work under deadline and I was also extremely outgoing as a kid. I never met a stranger. I'd go up to...
Shocked.
I know, it's a shock. But I would go up to, like, kids at football games when I was, like, 10. My sisters were both cheerleaders, and I was too, of course, please. But anyway, and I'd say, "You're Barbara McLaughlin, aren't you?" And the girl would say, "Yeah, how did you know that? I saw your picture in my sister's yearbook." Like, I was that weird, creepy kid. So I think my dad saw all these traits and just really encouraged me to go into journalism. And while I was in journalism, he was just my North Star. I could always talk to him about interviews I did and, ask him, was I too heavy-handed when I interviewed David Duke? And we would talk after the Today Show, and he would give me his 2 cents. Once I had to do a condom demonstration, and he said, "That was too far. You went too far, Katie, on that." But it was the AIDS epidemic, and we were trying to be educational. Anyway, so, he just, I always think of my dad was my... Well, and I was very close to my mom, too. But he was sort of my heart and I don't know, he was my soul and my mom was my heart, but they were both incredibly influential. My mom was a very creative person. She used to be a cartographer for Rand McNally, and she did layout for Coronet magazine, which was, I believe, the precursor to Esquire, and they met in Chicago when my dad was in the Navy. And, they were just incredible parents. They really emphasized the importance of education. They were very encouraging without being too pushy. They weren't helicoptery. They gave us all our freedom. But the 4 kids ended up being, I think, pretty accomplished people. My sister Emily, before she died of pancreatic cancer, was running for lieutenant governor with Mark Warner in Virginia. She was a real rising star in the Democratic Party. My sister Kiki, Clara, but I call her Kiki, is a landscape architect. My brother Johnny is a CFO of a company. So I feel like whatever they did, they I don't know, they I think emphasized the right things and gave us room to make mistakes, but they always expected us to be leaders and to excel academically. I was sort of the goof off, but my sisters they were all really smart and accomplished. So, and my mom was Jewish. Hello, can we not talk about that?
Yes.
So, hello, I'm a member of the tribe. I couldn't light the candles, but I'm learning. But that's something in the book that's interesting that I talk about, the fact that, and I've talked to my relatives who are Southern Jews in Birmingham, Alabama. My mom's family settled in Alex City, Alabama, and they had a department store, and then later in Atlanta. And, I write a lot about that because my mom was never very open about her Judaism. I wish she had been. But I think growing up in Virginia and in the era when she grew up, there was a lot of anti-Semitism. And I'm not sure if that was something that she agreed with my paternal grandmother, who was quite religious. But I'm so proud of my Jewish heritage now, and always have been, but I didn't realize it until I was 10 years old and saw a menorah in my uncle's bookcase. And I was like, all I could think of was that Tom Lehrer song about National Brotherhood Week. And if you're a certain age, you might remember that he wrote a song. It was all a satirical show on Sunday nights, and I was way too young to be watching it, but he wrote a song called The Protestants Hate, National Brotherhood Week, and it's the Protestants hate the Catholics hate the Protestants, and everybody hates the Jews. And that's all I could remember. And when I saw that menorah, I was like, oh my God. But, I wish she hadn't felt like she had to be quiet about her faith. But they were German Jews, and assimilation was so important. And I talked to my cousin Henry, who I mentioned lives in Birmingham, and I said, why do you think my mom was so secretive about that? And he said, we were citizens first and Jews second. It was an important part of our identity, and they closed the store on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but he said it wasn't first and foremost because we wanted to assimilate. And so maybe that had something to do with it. But that was an interesting thing to explore in the book for me.
I think you might be able to get a bat mitzvah date in 2026. So let me know.
Okay.
Behind my daughter.
Well, my daughters went to camp, and their last name is Monahan, and most of the girls at their camp were Jewish. So Carrie would come home and say, I want to have a not mitzvah. Because she felt left out.
The thing about your mom that was so moving, you wrote really beautifully about both your parents at the end of their lives and how you sort of came to terms with that. But after your mother died, when you called up the newspaper and said, okay, I need you to write an obituary for my mom, and they said, okay, well, tell us about her. And you were like, well, she was this amazing homemaker and this and that and the other thing. And there was silence on the other line. And you're like, why? Why does that not get written up? Why is that any less than other people's accomplishments? And yet here you are as a woman and a mother doing all these other things, and yet it seems imbalanced in a way. So tell me about that.
Well, when my dad was sick, he had Parkinson's, and my brother Johnny and I were at the hospital, and he was just not getting better. He had sundowners and was sort of hallucinating a little bit, and I walked into the hallway, and I was just crushed. I bring my little speaker and play Benny Goodman and Frank Sinatra and all these things, and it was just devastating for me to lose my dad and my mom and everyone else I've lost. But I said to my brother Johnny, we probably should write Dad's obituary, and he said, "Oh, Katie, don't worry, he's already written it," which was so thoughtful of him in a way. Well, I think because of his journalism background, he put something together, and I called the reporter at the Washington Post, and that was the paper my parents and I grew up on, and my dad would read at the kitchen table every morning, and I talked to the reporter. He was so nice, and I said, I'd like to submit, or can you help me with this obituary? And he was perfectly nice, and I didn't want it to be like my dad, because I'm one of 4 kids, and whenever somebody would say, are you Katie Couric's father, like I remember at the garage someone asked him that, or maybe it was the pharmacist, and he said, no, actually she's my daughter. And so we put this obituary in. There's a really nice picture of my dad from the Navy. And so when my mom died, I called and said, asked for the same guy, who was so nice. And he said, well, tell me about her. And I was like, well, she was a really good artist. She volunteered at Planned Parenthood. She worked in the gift department of Lord & Taylor when I was older. And she just raised 4 incredible kids. And it was like silence. And it made me realize that parenting is just still so undervalued in our culture. But there's so many people, honestly, who I think deserve obituaries. When I read the New York Times and the notices, it's weird when you start reading the obituaries, especially when you see their ages and you start freaking out and you're like, holy shit. Am I allowed to say that in here? Anyway, I think that we just don't celebrate. It made me realize, because I've worked my whole life, Zibby, and I know there's sometimes tension between parents, moms especially, who decide to stay home and raise their children, and women who are, quote unquote, doing it all as if. And it just made me really understand and appreciate everybody making the choices that are right for them, and how grateful I was to my mom.
So nice. You wrote a lot about this whole tension of being a mom and being a working mom when you were there, the events that you missed, how you felt about that. In fact, you even said when you found out you were pregnant the first time, you were like not happy about it. I don't know if I feel bad cursing. You can.
Yeah,
curse.
you don't curse. It's okay. Yeah. I think I said something, some expletive.
Right, 'cause
yeah.
You were.
Well, the trajectory of my career was just starting to take off. It was clear that I was sort of being groomed to take over the Today Show after this sort of Jane Pauley, Deborah Norville debacle that was very poorly handled by the management. They sort of pushed Jane out at 39, thinking she was too old, or losing younger viewers, which was ludicrous. And so it was not ideal timing. But of course, now in hindsight, and I remember seeing that T-shirt when I was in my 20s that said, oh my God, I forgot to have children. And I didn't want that to be me. I really wanted to have a family too. So it turns out I was really so lucky, because Jay and I had Ellie, and then 4.5 years later had Carrie. And, Jay was diagnosed with colon cancer at 41. So I'm just so grateful that there were 2 happy accidents who became my incredible daughters. So I feel very blessed.
I feel like I know your daughter after all your wedding pictures. I feel like I was there. Which is amazing. Another thing you did in your memoir that I don't see that often is all of the space you gave to your childcare providers and the relationships you had, and how there was one pretty contentious relationship there where one of them kind of went off the rails, which
it wasn't. I wouldn't call it contentious. I would call it batshit crazy.
Okay.
Yeah,
I said you can curse.
I had a crazy nanny, and it was scary. And the book. It's funny in the book. I give her an assumed name, which I shouldn't have, because she came out and talked to the tabloids after the book came out. Anyway, but she just had severe emotional problems, and the fact that an agency placed her with us, and this was my first child. I was in the middle of this incredible work experience, getting this job on the Today Show when I was 4 or 5 months pregnant, and she was older. And Jay thought it would be good to have an older person, more experienced. And he was living in Washington, working at a law firm. And so he thought that someone experienced would be great. But it was a really weird situation, because she kind of grew her roots very subtly into our home. And I think, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I think she had borderline personality disorder. And she, after a few weeks, she wanted me to hug her before she went to bed. And I did, which is so screwed up. But she didn't have a family. I remember going to the grocery store with her when I was on maternity leave, and By the way, I also, it's such a strange relationship you have with your child's caregiver, and I always want to be respectful and really value that person and compensate them well. And I remember her saying, I don't want to go away on the weekends. I want to feel like I'm a part of a family. And I was like, you can be a part of our family, instead of like, Mayday, 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 something may be wrong here. And so, and it was just the two of us and Ellie. And I was like, well, she's alone. She has no friends. She doesn't really have a family. What's the harm of giving her a hug before she goes to bed? Anyway, I have boundary issues anyway, so this one was just severe. And she worked for us for 3 years, and we finally had to fire her, and then she went crazy. She called the tabloids. She sent pictures of me in a bathing suit to, like, Tom Brokaw and Tim Russert. Like, aren't I cute? Love Katie. I was like, what? And oh my God, it was just so crazy. But, it's amazing how many women have these stories because it's such a bizarre relationship. It's so intimate. They're around when you're getting out of the shower and so important because they're taking care of the most important thing in your life. And yet you have to have these barriers, and it's really hard. But later I was very lucky, and I write a lot about Lori Beth, who was truly a co-parent for me after Jay died. And when she came for the interview, we had done a segment on falls on the Today Show, and I had this long thing of blonde hair, and I decided I would keep it on just because I thought it was so fun and funny. And she thought that I was incognito, and she couldn't understand why I was saying hi to everyone, and she was very confused by the whole thing. But she was wonderful, and I feel so indebted to her. And I write about how she taught Carrie, I think when she was 8, to recite "My Life is Like a Loaded Gun" by Emily Dickinson at the dinner table. And as I said, My Little Pony, it wasn't. Yeah. But she was just really smart and really caring, and I feel... Hi, Diana. I just feel really, really blessed that I had her in my life, and the girls love her like another mother.
You wrote a lot about your dating life in the book, including when you were dating Jay beforehand. And one of my favorite parts, which I read out loud to my kids because I thought it was so funny, is you had this one moment with Jay when you said, I guess you were looking at his hair, it looked like it was thinning a little bit, and you said, hey, do you think you're going to be bald when you get older? And he's like, I don't know, do you think you're going to be fat and ugly?
Yeah, I learned not to bring up his hair ever again. He had this mirror this hand mirror that he kind of tucked into our stack of towels, and I was like, I know what he's doing with it. He's checking it out in the morning, but he was very sensitive. He took a lot of pride in his appearance and was a very natty dresser, and obviously I touched a nerve. But he was very funny, and when I called him, I asked him out on our first date after I'd met him at a party, and I said, I thought you were going to call me, because I had given him my cheesy little News 4 card, and he'd given me his nice Williamson Conley card that was much more elegant than mine. And I said, I thought you were going to call me. He said, well, I guess I didn't have to. And I was like, wow, he's cocky. But
when you married John Molnar, who's here tonight, he also was cracking me up. I was like, this is great. I just have to hang out with all the people that Katie dates. This is...
John is really, really funny. Where are you, Molnar?
Well, he's around.
Hi. Anyway, yeah.
And he said...
John's great. I'm so lucky.
When you got married, I guess right before the ceremony, he said something like, well, I'm the luckiest guy on Amy's Lane. Well, this side of Amy's Lane.
Yeah. He's funny. He's very witty and has a great sense of humor. And I feel really lucky that I found a partner. I'm 6 years older than he is. I'm a cougar. And I feel really lucky that I found a life partner after losing Jay. It took a lot of dates in between and boyfriends and kind of unsuccessful relationships. But finally, I found Molnar, and I always give people advice that they have to be intentional. When I did my book tour, Zibby, I went to 10 cities, and I tried to give these life lessons, and one of them was to be intentional. And I was very, very adamant about finding someone. I wanted to get remarried. I'm a pretty traditional person, and my friend Molly, who I used to go to flywheel spinning when I was into that for a nanosecond, said her husband is a South African doctor. And I said, hey, Molly, does Dave know any doctors? I think I'd like to go out with a doctor because I've learned so much about cancer research, and I really enjoy the science part of it. And I haven't really dated that many doctors except for that weird plastic surgeon, which we'll talk about later. But anyway, so she said, no, we don't know any doctors, but we do know this banker named John Molnar. So every time I saw Molly, I'd be like, Molly, what happened to the Molnar guy? He's never called me. So finally he did, and we had a great first date. But I tell people, in fact, I have a whole little section in my newsletter today with advice on dating, that you just have to really, it's a numbers game. You got to cycle through them. Don't ever meet for dinner, because then you're trapped for a couple of hours. And those are 2 hours of your life you'll never get back. So always meet for wine or coffee in a public place, because you want to be safe. And really ask all your friends, and just really kind of be relentless about it. And, if that's something you want in your life, and by the way, you don't necessarily have to want it, and that's fine too. But, you just have to really focus on it as if you're looking for a job. That's my attitude. And that always worked for me, even though my relationships weren't always that successful.
I also married someone 6 years younger who is very funny and witty, so we'll have to compare notes on these second marriages.
A sense of humor is so critical, I think, especially now in the world we live in. It's so bleak and depressing at times, and so much rancor and acrimony. I think, you have to have somebody who makes you laugh, I think. That's really important.
I totally agree. In terms of your work life, just one thing I found really interesting, and which you sort of alluded to earlier, is how fragmented the news industry is, but also how you grew up in the Today Show world, where you could have 1 minute talking to the president, and the next minute you could be doing something about, I don't know, paper towels or something.
Or talking to Miss Piggy.
Teletubbies, or
yeah,
I don't know what.
Yeah.
And how you've been, in other endeavors, people try to push you into certain things, the daytime TV role, and that you had to be a certain way, and then the very serious CBS News role, and how it's so tricky to just sort of find all the parts of a person in a particular job. And that's why your new Katie Couric Media is like so great, and I love your newsletter, because you have all of that in there. But why is that so hard to find? Why do people think that it has to be so narrow?
Well, I think there's a certain expectation for news people, especially television news people. They used to say when I went to the CBS Evening News that I lacked gravitas, which I always say is Latin for testicles. and I think it's very hard, I think, to still kind of see women in positions of power. I think people are suspicious of women as powerful figures, as authority figures. And I think there's so much cultural conditioning still, at least for people of my generation, to as I said, be suspicious of someone who is both feminine and authoritative, who can have fun and have a outgoing, fun personality, but also have intellectual depth and, the kind of curiosity and intelligence that being a good journalist requires. So I think that's changing a bit, but I just think that we sort of pigeonhole people. And that's, I think, because I have a big personality and I'm very kind of fun loving, but I also have an extremely serious side. And I think it's just hard for people to see individuals in all their multi-dimensional splendor. You know, they want to pigeonhole you and put you in a category. So I think that was one of the things. And with my new company and our new company, I can do interviews with someone about the damn Omicron, or however you say it, variant. How upsetting is that? Keeping our fingers and toes crossed on that. And, but I can also do a fun interview. I can do an IG Live with Leslie Jordan, or, with Ina Garten when she's making a giant Cosmo during the pandemic. So I can kind of satisfy all different sides of myself and just do things that I'm interested in. But I wanted to ask you, Zibby, because, Zibby is really doing incredible things with her company. And you're really, one of the things I realized in writing this book is publishing is an industry that is ripe for disruption. And because I think they've been doing it sort of the same way for decades, if not centuries. So I wanted to have you, for the people who aren't familiar with the kind of things you're doing with your company, explain how you're approaching this changing media and changing publishing landscape.
Yes, thank you. And then after I do this, we'll go to questions for a little
bit.
Because I don't want to take away from your book. But yes, I recently started Zibby Books, which is a new publishing company, and we're doing 12 books a year of fiction and memoir, telling it like it is. And one of the reasons why is because on my podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, I've interviewed almost 900 people.
Wow.
And I've heard the same things over and over again about all the issues in publishing and finally, I've been thinking of doing this for over a year. I just kept thinking, well, how is it going to change? It's impossible. Some of the companies are so big and so entrenched in the ways they're doing things. And with my own books, and I have books coming out with 3 different publishers or that have come out, I kept hearing like, no, well, we don't do it this way. And I'm like, well, let's try this. No, we can't do it that way. And I don't like that. I'm like, why not? I don't understand. Like, how are you going to find a book if it's stored in the top shelf when there's one copy and then they sell out and they won't reorder? And it's like, well, of course you're going to, if you sold it, why? Anyway, I'll stop. But I had a lot of frustrations, and I felt like there was a whole new way to do it, and why not try? And I kept waiting, and then I was like, well, maybe I'm the person who's supposed to do this. Why not me? What if I try it? So I partnered with Lee Newman, who is in the publishing, has been in the publishing world forever. She used to be at Oprah and started Catapult Books, so someone knew what they were doing a little bit. But she keeps saying, well, this is how it's done in publishing. And every day I'm like, well, let's not do it that way then. Like, let's try it a different way. So we're shaking things up from distribution, how we're getting the word out. We're starting with this effort we just launched called #22and22, where we're encouraging, and you all should sign up, people to go to bookstores 22 times in the year 2022. And I'll give out these like little prizes and badges, and I'm going to make it like a fun thing. Somebody said,
"Do we get a sticker book?"
You did. You're going to get a sticker. You're going to get a badge. You're going to get all sorts of stuff. Somebody said, well, thank God this is a lot better than a weight loss challenge for 2022. So, and so we're changing it up. We're doing profit sharing among all our authors. We're going to have a class of authors. All of the things we're doing counter some issue that we've seen. And we're starting book ambassadors all around the country to lift up the authors. And
so are you looking to discover new authors, or are you all, so that's part of it, but also you're celebrating published authors too.
Yes.
And I know that you have a new book, an anthology of essays written by some really impressive authors who we're going to be meeting later tonight.
They're coming up soon. I have 2 anthologies written by people who have all been on my podcast because they are amazing authors and I love their books. And 11 of them are here tonight, and we're going to hear from them very soon. But yes, I couldn't get enough. When I do my podcast, they're about 30 minutes long, and I always want to know more. So I thought this would be a good way to get original content from some amazing writers, and that's how the anthologies came to be.
And it's so great because it's really hard to get attention for books. It's really challenging, and so for you to be able to bring attention, and that's what we're trying to do too at my company, and make sure that some of these writers, that people know about them, and especially first-time authors. So I think it's wonderful what you're doing. And by the way, Zibby's a real smarty pants. She's being modest, but she went to Yale and Harvard Business School, and so she knows what she's doing. So don't act all like, I had to get someone who knew what they were doing.
I meant I hadn't been in publishing.
You're a good businesswoman, so own it, sister.
Okay, great. Bye, Lee. No, I'm kidding. Well, I think we can open it up for questions for a few minutes, and then after that, we're going to invite all our authors from the anthology on the stage, and then we'll do our little speed shopping, whatever, speed dating author. Does anybody have any questions? You can...
Oh, that's hard for her. Do you want me to just hand her my mic? I feel bad. Sorry.
If anyone else has questions, who's closer,
Yeah, don't be shy, you all.
come on up.
Should I pull this down while I'm talking? That's a very tall.
Hi, Katie. Beth Raisin. We went to UVA together and graduated together, class of 79.
Wahoo wah, baby. Hi. Nice to see you.
It's great to see you. I have two questions for you. The first is there a point in your life where your ambition really manifested itself and you became truly aware of it and harnessed it? And the second question is, how challenging was it to be the anchor at CBS News and to navigate that pathway? I would tune in to watch you, and I thought you were trying.
Did I look miserable?
Well, it was clear you were trying to break new ground, and it was clear that the powers that be weren't really thrilled with that. So I'm curious to know how you navigated that journey. But I'm also curious about the ambition question.
Well, thank you for those two questions. I think for the ambition question, I think I always wanted a career. I came of age sort of at as the feminist movement, was really gaining steam rather, and I always just wanted to make sure I had a career. And I think in my 20s, I made a very conscious decision that I was going to focus myopically on my career. I didn't want to be tied down by a guy. I dated somebody in every market I lived in, and then sort of like one in every port. I was kind of a guy about it, and then but I just didn't want to make accommodations for someone else. I wanted to be selfish and focus on getting the experience I needed to do well professionally. And so I think I was ambitious from the get-go. And I read a book that I highly recommend called Feminine Mistake, about not being independent, financially independent. And it really struck me that I didn't want the feeling of depending on a man. Now, for some people, it's fine, but I didn't like that feeling. I didn't like the inequality and the imbalance of power that came with that. And so I think in my 20s, it was pretty clear that I wanted something and I was going to achieve it. I was very focused. And then the other question, I forgot. Wait. CBS, yeah. Well, I write all about this in my book, and I hope you all will read it. It was challenging on many levels. I think because I was the first female, I think some of them doubted that I was a real journalist because I had done a morning show, even though John Chancellor had done that, Tom Brokaw had done that, Bryant Gumbel. So I think it was heavily gendered in that way. Because I had done more hard news interviews than any of the evening anchors combined, I think. And I also just think it was a culture clash. CBS was very kind of old school, took pride on being very traditional, and I think I was threatening. My presence was threatening because Les Moonves brought me there to kind of shake things up and to reimagine an evening newscast, which he felt had become sort of stale and anachronistic. And I think I just represented a threat. I was a change agent in an environment where they really didn't want to change. And so I think it was a lot of change in an organization. It was like I was a transplanted heart, and the body rejected the organ. And as I said, I think in my book, no amount of immunosuppressants were going to change that. And it was painful. And I tell the story in the book where I was at the dinner table and I started crying, and my girls were like 12 and 8 or something. No, I think Carrie was 10, so Ellie was like 14. And I started crying, and they were like, "Mom, what's the matter?" And I was like, I'm so I always sound like Mary Tyler Moore when I do that. And they said, and Carrie, who was 10, said, "Mom, remember what Samantha said in Sex and the City?" And I was like, oh my God, I'm also a terrible mother on top of this. She said, "If I listened to what every bitch in New York said about me, I'd never leave the house." And I was like, oh my God, Carrie. Anyway, it made me laugh because here was my 10-year-old quoting Samantha. But I just powered through. I didn't want to quit. And I think I might have made it easier for some of the women who came after me. I hope I did. But it was a challenging period of my life. That's probably why I dated a guy 17 years younger than I was, but that's in the book too.
That was also a great section. Yeah, go ahead. Here.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
I have so much to say. I'm such a super fan. First of all, I loved your book, and I listened to it on Audible, which is amazing because it's you. I felt like you were talking to me, and with all the
clips from the
clips
interviews and
are
stuff.
So
Yeah.
good. I'm also a colon cancer survivor. So that was
so glad.
At age 41. But those aren't I have two questions. First is, how did you remember all of those details of your life? Like, I know you hold on to a lot of stuff and you went back in time, but I was just amazed at all the specific detail that you were able to come up with. And the second question is, have you heard from Matt Lauer since the book?
Two good questions. First of all, I'm so glad you're doing well. So I'm so happy about that. And everyone, please get screened for colon cancer. A lot of people are putting it off because of the pandemic. But if anyone, is 45 or over, you need to talk to your doctor about getting screened. It's the number 2 cancer killer of men and women combined, but it's so preventable. So if I leave you with any thought, let me leave you with that. So now I forgot the first question. Wait.
The detail of your...
How do you remember that?
Not the Matt Lauer. Okay, I'll get to the Matt Lauer.
The detail of
Yeah,
how did you remember everything?
I think I do have a good memory, and I kept a lot of things. I'm a pack rat, so I had all the speeches pretty much I had ever given, so many letters from people, both well-known and strangers, when I got certain jobs and when Jay was sick and when I got married and all that. So, and plus, there's Google. And I could look up a lot of the interviews I did, YouTube, and I would also, the archivists at the networks were really generous and helped me. They sent me things, and I kept folders and notebooks of hour specials I had done, an interview with the Central Park jogger. So I could refer to a lot of those things as well as magazine articles. And I don't know if you read the book, my parents kept these scrapbooks for me throughout my career. They mysteriously stopped when I went to CBS, probably because there weren't enough good articles to save. But so I had those to rely on too, which were really helpful. I have not heard from Matt Lauer. That was a really hard part of the book to write. It was a very hard period of time for me to see someone I had worked with and respected and had a friendship with, to learn about some of the things that were going on was really, really upsetting to me. And, I write in the book that our friendship really deteriorated pretty quickly after he was fired, because I was very confused, honestly, and there was a lot of cognitive dissonance for me, and so we're really not friends anymore. But I hope I handled it in the book in a way that was sensitive and helped people understand how I tried to process learning this information about someone who really abused his power in a way that was quite damaging to a number of young women.
It was a great chapter. I thought you did a good job. Okay, last question, and then we're going to go to our anthology.
Katie, if you had the chance to start from scratch, how would you do it differently?
If I had, sorry,
If you lost everything and had to start all over again, how would you do it?
That's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question. If I lost everything and had to do it over again, I think some of the things that I've done, I would do again. I would try to have a profession that I really loved and felt passionately about. And I would hope that I would use my skills to improve the world or help people understand it. Maybe I would go into politics. I think that would be really interesting, but I don't think my skin is thick enough to handle that. But there's not a lot I would do differently. I'm really, for the most part, pretty proud of how I've lived my life and how I've tried to do my best. But that was an interesting question.
Thanks. I thought it was going to be one of those dorky Barbara Walters / Phyllis George questions.
Well, I don't know. Barbara Walters never asked somebody what kind of tree they would be. I think she was unfairly maligned for that. Phyllis George did ask, I think, a rapist to hug his victim. So
that was it. Rich Podolsky, You Were Looking Live, great book, highly recommended.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All
Okay,
right.
So moving on to the next section of our night. Should I call people up one by one? Yes. Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, first we're going to have, these are all contributors, by the way, to the anthology. Moms don't have time to have kids. It's not too late. You can order. Hanukkah's not even over. Okay, Esther Amini is the author of Concealed, a memoir, and she is going to tell you a little bit more about her book and her essay in the anthology.
Hi, I'm Esther Amini. My book is entitled Concealed. The subtitle is Memoir of a Jewish Iranian Daughter Caught Between the Chador and America. The book is a memoir, and it's about my life, having grown up caught between two opposing cultures. My parents came from the Iranian city of Mashhad, and Mashhad is the most fanatically Islamic city in all of Iran. It's considered the holiest city with zero tolerance for anyone who's different. So my ancestors lived there, my parents lived there as crypto-Jews. And so the Jews of Mashhad are often compared to the Marranos of Spain. And so they lived a life of duplicity, duality, paranoia, came to the United States because of mounting anti-Semitism, but came here in 1947, right after World War II, and a few years later, I was born. So the background is very important because I was born unto Mashhad. I mean, my father brought the city with him to Queens, New York, and I was torn between the values, the principles that he was advocating, one of them being girls should not learn to read and write, because in Mashhad, girls were kept illiterate. And another was that girls should marry very young. His mother was married at the age of 9. to my grandfather, who was 29, and my mother was married at the age of 14 to my father, who was 34. And all of that was very normal and expected. So the book is all about what they brought, how I navigated through, wanting to hold on to them and wanting to hold on to myself. Lots of humor in the book because of the culture clash, because America doesn't understand Iran, Iran doesn't understand America. My parents were diametric opposites. So there was a lot of collisions, cultural collisions, interpersonal collisions, lots of room for humor. And I hope that you pick the book up, read it. I really believe you would enjoy it, and it's an eye-opener into that culture. Okay, thank you.
All books are for sale in the lobby, and all the authors will sign downstairs afterwards. Adrienne Bankert, who flew in all the way from Chicago just for this and is flying right back because she is a morning news anchor herself.
Right. Okay. Hi, everybody. I used to live here in New York City. I was a correspondent with ABC News, Good Morning America, and I wrote the book during that time, so you find a lot about what it was like to work at Good Morning America for me. But the book was inspired by a few things, and one was that my mentor actually said, you should write a book on kindness. And I thought, I'm not kind enough to write a book on kindness. Why don't you write a book on kindness? And they said, no, you really have a different perspective. And the truth is that I'm one of 7 children, raised by a single mom predominantly. I had these big dreams to go to New York City and work as a network anchor. And the path that led me to that dream or towards that dream was so different than I had expected. And it was not going to be cookie cutter, but it was so disappointing in some ways. It was way more work in other ways. And I quickly learned that whatever I was going to do on television, when that camera was shining on me, was going to be a direct reflection of the experiences that I had when a camera wasn't on me. It was going to be based on the relationships that I forged and the connections that I made when no one was watching, and that I was broadcasting all the time. And so how could I live my life authentically and actually be really engaged in life? Because if I just had a really good career and made good money and did what I said I was going to grow up to be, and yet wasn't happy, at one point I was traveling all over the world and I was interviewing celebrities and I was coming back from Prague, and I felt sad. And I said, what is this cloud hanging over me? And this little voice on the inside of me said, what if everything was working out for you? And I said, well, if everything was working out for me, I'd be the happiest girl in the world. I'd be jumping up and down. And that kind of sparked writing the book. How could I tap in to something that it didn't matter what city I was in, it didn't matter what job I was doing, it didn't matter how people were treating me? Because the fact is, no matter what industry you're in, people are going to treat you a certain way. Life is going to take zigs and zags. The past year and a half has taught us that. How are we going to respond so that we don't respond out of defense, so we don't respond out of wounds? I saw myself and other people walking around like the walking wounded, and I just made this conscious decision that I would find the answer. And the answer for me, the aha moment for me, turned out to be that the light switch to me being who I really, really was, so that life wouldn't damage me so much that I'd give you some 10% version of myself, as if my cell phone is me, and I'm only on 10% battery charge, I'm going to reserve the use of this technology that can connect me with anyone in the world. I'm going to keep it in my pocket and only use it for emergency calls. I'm not going to surf the internet. I'm not going to go on social media because I don't have another way to charge it. How could I recharge myself? And what I found is me being kind was the highest and best version of me. So the book is titled Your Hidden Superpower, the kindness that connects you with anyone. It makes you unbeatable at work and connects you with anyone. And rather than try to be a certain kind of person, I decided to be the real me. And in being kind, I was able to connect in interviews. In being kind, I was able to show appreciation to my crew, which was very vital in the business that I am in. And I ended up moving to Chicago to take a job as a morning news anchor. I'm on a network called News Nation, and it's 3 hours of live TV, and I solo host it. But everything that I did and all that hard work that was so painful at times led me to this place. But if I had lost myself, I wouldn't have been eligible for it. So it's a book that's inspiring. It's got amazing stories in it. And I know that no matter what you do in life, you're going to see and you're going to tap into the true you, the you that has always been meant to be. And that is your hidden superpower, kindness. Thank you.
Amazing. All right, Janine Cummins. Janine Cummins is the best-selling author of American Dirt, which was the Oprah's book pick.
Hi, everybody. I was going to start by asking Katie Couric to give me a hug, but I am also trying to work on my boundaries. So I wrote a book called American Dirt. It's my fourth book, third novel. I was as surprised as anyone when I got the call from Oprah that it was going to be an Oprah's Book Club selection. Changed my life in a lot of great ways and some really crazy ways. The book is something that I spent 5 years working on, researching. It's a novel about a young woman named Lydia, and she lives in Acapulco, and she's a bookseller. And she has a little boy named Luca, who's 8. And on the first page, the first chapter of the book, there's an act of unspeakable violence that befalls their family. And Luca and Lydia are the only survivors of a massacre. And what follows is that they fall very quickly out of their comfortable middle-class lives, and they become migrants. They have no choice but to run for their lives. So the book is the story of their journey, running from danger, running toward what they hope will be relative safety. But, really it's the story of compulsory migration, which is kind of the global story of our times, I think. But more than that, I think and I hope that it transcends the boundaries of where the characters come from. Because for me, it's a story about parents and children and the sort of unbreakable bonds of love that exist between us. And I wanted the novel to read like the experience of asking the reader, what if it happened to you? What if you were a mother who was living in a place that began to collapse around you? What would you do to save your child? And this novel is my attempt at answering that question. So I hope you'll read it and enjoy it. Thank you.
Amazing. All right, Michael Frank is the author of What is Missing, which, by the way, my husband Kyle his production company is optioned, so it will be a film or limited series or whatever soon, so stay tuned.
Let's hope. Thank you, Zibby and Katie. Thank you for having me here this evening. What is Missing is my novel. It is a triangle, a father, a son, and a woman who meet in a pensione in Florence. It transfers to New York for a dramatic year and then concludes in Liguria. It's about absence, and absence is another way of saying it's about longing. In the case of Costanza, she's longing for a baby, Henry, a partner, Andrew, the son, to understand the origin of his life. All of these quests come together as Costanza undergoes a grueling couple of cycles of in vitro fertilization. She's 40 years old, half Italian, half American. Henry, the man she meets in Italy, just happens to be a physician who specializes in fertility. Every character in the course of this book, as in any, I think, aspiringly good novel, undergoes some kind of journey, and Costanza's is to find out who she is, who Henry is, what it was to be the daughter of the mother she was. For Henry, it's to understand his father, who was a survivor of the Shoah and put a great deal of pressure on him to become a physician who specialized in repopulating the world. For Andrew, it's to understand why something in his life doesn't make sense. And I won't say what that is because you'll find out if you read the book. people say the book is psychologically tense and kind of like a thriller, but I just think of it as this journey that these three characters go on, and where they end up is still in some ways a mystery to me, but they do end up by the last page coming to a certain kind of peace, each of them with his or her own life. Anyway, I hope you read it, and thank you again.
All right. Next up is Alyssa Friedland, who's written many books, including The Floating Feldmans, Love and Miscommunication, and her most recent, Last Summer at the Golden Hotel.
Hi. I'm the first person to bring a paper up here. I'm feeling very self-conscious about it. So I'm going to try to do what Katie would do and wing it. So thank you so much. I think I'm Zibby's only three-peat on the podcast. And Katie, we're neighbors. I've noticed you more than you've noticed me for some reason. But we live on the same block, and I see you all the time. So next time I'm going to just run over and hug you. So, as Zibby said, Last Summer at the Golden Hotel is my fourth novel. I've also got a picture book coming out next year, and I teach novel writing at Yale. So that's what keeps me busy. And I'd love to tell you about Last Summer at the Golden Hotel, because I think it's the perfect book for this holiday season when we're all about to be forced into a lot of togetherness. So for a moment, forget about Omicron, and pretend that we are going to travel with reckless abandon. So pack your bags and come with me to the Catskills, to the region known as the Borscht Belt. I know everyone here has seen Dirty Dancing at least 5 times. So the Golden Hotel is just like Kellerman's from the Dirty Dancing movie. It was the place to see and be seen if you were an upper crust Jewish person from the Northeast. And it's co-owned by 2 families, the Weingolds and the Goldmans. And they're best friends and business partners, and we all know how well that always works out. And as time goes on, the Borscht Belt falls out of fashion, and you know in real life, Grossingers, the Concord, Browns, the Nevele, Kutchers, they all shutter one by one. But in my book, the Golden Hotel is still hanging on by a thread until a casino developer approaches the families and offers to buy the hotel and convert it into a casino. This brings 3 generations of both families back to the Borscht Belt to eat a lot of brisket, drink a lot of Manischewitz, have affairs, have all their secrets come out, and I won't say what happens. Do they sell or do they keep it? But I am told the ending is very satisfying. I also, just like Katie, have been known to read my own book in bed, and also my children have come into the car and they're like, on Audible again? So sometimes it does feel good to, read your own work and take pride in it. So I hope that you will buy Last Summer at the Golden Hotel. It's perfect to put under your Hanukkah bush this year. It was a Good Morning America Buzz Pick and a Book of the Month Club selection. But if this is the first you're hearing about it, I hope it won't be the last. And thank you, Zibby and Katie.
Good job. All right, next up, Richie Jackson, who's the author of a memoir called Gay Like Me, and you will see his sweater is just perfection.
Hi. So my husband and I have 2 children, and when our older son told us he was gay, I was elated. I had hoped he'd be gay. I wanted him to be gay. My greatest wish was for him to be gay. And then he said, Daddy, being gay is not a big deal. My generation doesn't think it's a big deal. And I thought, oh no, being gay is the best part about me. It's the most important part about me. And I didn't want him to be one of these people who diminishes it and demeans it by saying gay doesn't define me, I just happen to be gay. If he did that, he would break his own heart. and not take full advantage of the gift that it is. So I sat down to write him a letter to tell him what it means to be a gay man. And then Donald Trump was elected and brought with him to Washington Mike Pence, both of them more of a threat to our son than ISIS and North Korea. Now I had to warn him what it takes to be a gay man in America. Gay people are just LGBTQ people, queer people is what the kids call it, are just 4.5% of the population. Just 4.5%. It's not like we're a batch that came out wrong, that we're broken. We are, in fact, chosen. We are chosen to look at the world differently, to see the world differently, to feel differently. It's a blessing. I wrote this book to change the way we talk about LGBTQ people. Think about what we go through. We disappoint our parents. We're at battle with our government. We're stigmatized by religions. We're bullied in our childhoods. We're erased in our classrooms. We have survived a plague. And still, we rise and we come out and we say, "This is me." It is the spirit of an extraordinary species of people. I wrote the book to activate my son's superpower. And so if you know someone who's LGBTQ and you want to say you are worthy, then this book does that. If you're raising an LGBTQ child, it will help you understand their journey and help you raise them with good self-esteem and resilience. And if you're a parent and you know there's something special in your child, that you want to blow oxygen on that part so that you can raise them to fulfill their potential and reach their destiny, my book can show you how to do that as well. Thank you. Thank you.
This is amazing. I love listening to all this. I hope y'all are enjoying it. Okay, Caroline Lovett is a best-selling author of many books, her most recent of which is With or Without You. And by the way, she co-founded A Mighty Blaze, which you should all check out, and helps lots of authors.
Hi, thank you all for being here. And I want to thank Zibby. Because of Zibby, my book was a Good Morning America online pick. And I need to thank Katie because of the amazing earrings she wore on Bill Maher. I had to go out and spend a lot of time on Etsy to buy these. So thank you, Katie. Okay. What would you do if the love of your life suddenly went into a coma, and when they came out, they were a totally different personality, and even stranger, they had a strange new ability? This actually does happen in coma sometimes. In my book, With or Without You, it starts with Stella, a very practical, in her 40s nurse, and she's arguing with her longtime partner, Simon, to get his act together. He's also in his 40s. He was a famous rock and roller, and now he's struggling. So to recapture their youth, they drink, they smoke, they do drugs, they pass out. In the morning, Simon's the only one who wakes up. Stella's in a coma for 3 months. And when she wakes up, she's a complete stranger, both to herself and to Simon. Even stranger, she starts painting, and she's able to discover the inner dreams of all the subjects she paints, which makes her incredibly famous, something she does not want and Simon yearns for. This particular story actually has a personal component. Three weeks after I gave birth to my son, I got sick and I was in a coma for 4 weeks. They gave me memory blockers because they felt that it would be a very bad idea for me to remember the procedures, the trauma, the pain. I didn't remember that, but the sad thing about that is when you can't remember, you can't process trauma. So for years and years after that, I would have all these weird triggers and panic attacks, and I suddenly went to a therapist, and the therapist said, okay, you're a writer. What you need to do is make up the memories. Give them to somebody who's distinctly unlike you. So I created Stella, and I gave the memories to her. And that therapist was right. Right now, I've gotten rid of I have maybe like 5% panic attacks left in me, and those I can sort of handle. And the interesting thing for me is in living my life through Stella, I learned a whole lot about love, what we owe the people we love, whether we should stay, whether we should leave. And the most amazing thing for me is that I also learned that we're all transforming all the time. And some of those transformations may not be so great, but a lot of them are really full of wonder. I felt that, and I hope that if you read my book that you'll feel that too. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have 4 more amazing guests. Gigi Levangie is the author of The Starter Wife, which became a TV show with Deborah Messing, and also her latest, Been There, Married That.
Been There, Married That. Somebody's not happy about that title. I don't know who it could be. Before I talk about my book, Alyssa, you live a block from Katie. Katie and I dated the same man. What? No. Tom. Oh. I kind of had to.
We need to talk.
Yeah, no, I was newly divorced. He was the #1 bachelor in LA. That's what you do. So my book, Been There, Married That, I have, this is my 8th book. I wrote a movie called Stepmom. That's how I started writing. I wrote that in about 10 days, the first draft. I was very motivated by my relationship with the mom. So I made her a very good mother, but got rid of her. We're good friends now, it's all good. But after that, after the reviews came out, I thought, I don't need a team of people to get bad reviews. I can get bad reviews on my own. So I started writing books, and I wrote The Starter Wife and The Man-Eater, and those became miniseries. And this one, my 8th book, Been There, Married That, is more about sisters. I have 3 sisters. I'm the 3rd of 4. And we're all 18 months apart. My father stayed home and raised us. He's an ex-staff sergeant. And my mother worked outside the home as a principal in East LA. So I had like a lot of discipline thrown at me for a very long time. But this is a story about 2 sisters who are very different. One is a writer who's in the middle of a very nasty Hollywood divorce. I cannot relate at all, but I did a lot of research. And the other sister is an ex-con. She gets out of prison, and she decides she's going to help her sister navigate this divorce. I do have a sister who's an ex-con, and I remember one day I got a phone call. I was living in a 30,000 square foot mansion, 29 phones. And I would get phone calls from prison. So the ringing would go on and on and on, waves. And I finally said to her, Mimi, I have enough writing material. You don't need to do this anymore. And that's basically why I write. So this one is a comedy. And I do hope that you enjoy it. As Nora Ephron said, to paraphrase her, and she was a friend as well, you never really get to know someone until you divorce them. So my tagline with this is buy it or be sad. So I hope you enjoy.
Thank you. By the way, Gigi came all the way from LA just for this, so that was super nice, so thank you. Jean Mcculloch is the author of a memoir called All Happy Families and is also very involved with the Paris Review.
I came all the way from Brooklyn. Do I get credit for that?
Okay.
There was traffic, too.
Okay.
Thank you for having us here. It's a pleasure to be here. My memoir, All Happy Families, I first want to say something about how it all got started. I've spent most of my career as an editor, a literary editor, not as a writer. I was at the Paris Review for a very long time, and I'm still on the board. I can't quite shake the Paris Review. And I had written an essay for an anthology, and an editor approached me afterwards and asked if I would expand it into a memoir. And I thought, oh yeah, 5,000 words, 70,000 words, that'll be no problem. I'll just go for it. And I suddenly realized once I tried to write about something that was that personal for that long, that a lot of skeletons were going to come out of the closet. And I heard an interview with a writer, I think it was Danny Shapiro actually, wonderful memoirist, who said that memoir is really a way to process trauma and to tell stories so that you can give shape to it. So my book was about the weekend I got married. And I got married a long time ago. I was very young. And my father ended up dying that weekend from an alcohol problem he had. And so the book is really about two families that come together for one event that's supposed to be really joyous, and it ends up being very different, obviously. And there is a sense of what family dysfunction does to two very different families. There is an overlay of addiction in it, but there's also a lot of humor in it, because it was a shitstorm. I mean, the wedding was a shitstorm. My mother was insisting that we go ahead with it. So it was both heartbreaking, and yet we were going through tradition. And so a lot of this book is also about what are family traditions. When family come together, what do they share, and what we can take out of that. I just wanted to say something about memory, actually, since it's come up a few times. And it's a question I get a lot when I talk about my book. And I also teach memoir. I have a writing workshop in Baja. So what I tell people is, if you're writing narrative nonfiction, and it's very personal, and you get worried about what you can or cannot remember, the thing to remember is that memory is emotional truth. And if you remember something, there's usually a very good reason you remember it. So start there, and then just sit with the characters and the material. Anyway, I'm happy to talk to you more about that afterwards, but thank you.
Next up is best-selling author Alison Pataki, who has written The Queen's Fortune. She has a new book coming out about Marjorie Merriweather Post. She wrote a beautiful memoir, Beauty in the Broken Places, and has a children's book series.
Thank you, Zibby and Katie. I'm so honored to be in this lineup of amazing authors, and I didn't travel as far. I traveled 1 hour, but I have 3 kids under the age of 6, so metaphorically and emotionally and intellectually, I have traveled to another planet than what I am usually doing at this point in the evening. So thank you, husband. I can't hear from here, but I hope it's going well. But tied in with that, in Zibby's anthology, I wrote on the topic of sleep and how it's something that I vaguely remember from the past, and how 1 year for my birthday, after I had had a few grueling introductory years to the role of motherhood, after I had been the primary caregiver for my husband through his health crisis while I was pregnant, and then the primary caregiver for my daughters through their own medical issues, how all I wanted for my birthday was a night of sleep. And I asked if I could just go to a hotel. And my husband, being very sweet, was like, yeah, should we ask your mom or a babysitter? I can join you. And I was like, no, you are not invited. I am going to be by myself and not talk for 24 hours and sleep. But so, tied in with that as well, raising 3 little ladies, I have fallen headlong in love with the genre of historical fiction, and specifically historical fiction that is based on these fantastic, powerful, fascinating, compelling women whose names you might not have ever heard of in your history lessons. And so this is my 8th book, The Queen's Fortune, but it is my 5th in the genre of historical fiction, sort of pulling women from the wings of the stages of history and putting them center stage. So the tip for this one, actually, for Desiree Clary, came from my father, who said, Alison, you love history, you love going down the rabbit hole and uncovering the stories of these women whose names have been more forgotten in history. You need to look into this French woman, Desiree Clary. I'd never heard the name Desiree Clary. He said, just Napoleon, start there, look into Desiree Clary. So I began this research on Desiree Clary and found that before Napoleon's famous, sort of infamous, dysfunctional relationship with Josephine, he had been engaged to and been madly in love with this woman, Desiree. He broke her heart to marry Josephine, but his brother, who was his best friend, Joseph, married Desiree's sister, who was her best friend, Julie. And so even after Napoleon breaks her heart and goes on to become emperor and have this meteoric rise with Josephine, the love of his life, Desiree is stuck in the inner circle of the French imperial family. Author Lauren Willig made a good point saying, it's kind of like the Real Housewives of the Tuileries Palace. And so fast forward, they have us falling out. She goes on to become a queen of Sweden and outlasts them all. But what fascinated me, and I'll leave with this, is Napoleon at the end of his life in his exile is writing. He had obviously beef with everybody that spanned continents and many military campaigns. But I could just tell from his writing that it still irked him, that Desiree was the one that had gotten away. And not only had she gotten away, she had outlasted him, and she had gone on to found her own dynasty, which still rules to this day. So history provides the best raw material, and women, particularly in history, provide the best raw material to not only educate, but also entertain and transport us. And so I hope you will check it out, The Queen's Fortune, and thank you.
All right, our final author preview is Susan Shapiro, who is a beloved and well-known teacher at the New School and has written many books, including Five Men Who Broke My Heart, and her latest, The Forgiveness Tour.
So thank you, Zibby and Katie, and I'm honored to be in this group. A Hasidic colleague once told me Jewish law requires a person to ask heartfelt forgiveness 3 times. If the injured party won't forgive, the sinner is forgiven, and the non-forgiver must seek forgiveness for not forgiving. Yet the request has to be inspired by true regret. My memoir, The Forgiveness Tour, which took 10 years to write, asked the question, how do you forgive someone who hurt you if they won't offer a sincere apology and says only, I'm sorry for the imaginary crime you think I committed?
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you so much, Katie, and to everybody, and to everybody for watching.
Everyone.
And I hope you'll all join us and go downstairs to get your new book signed. I hope you snatch up all the copies of those authors' books in the lobby and that you enjoy Katie's book, Going There, and my anthology. And thanks for spending so much time with us tonight. Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. Thanks, Zibby.
A big thank you to Katie Couric and to Zibby Owens. I know it's a late night. I know a lot of us are tired, but please join us downstairs. We set up a little party for you guys. The authors came a long way. Let's show them some support. Meet me downstairs. Don't be late. Thank you.
Thanks, Scotty.
Please come back anytime you write a book.